Hi, and thank you for listening to Dream 10X Radio, where we interview people attempting to live extraordinary lives. Our twofold purpose is to both direct and inspire people bold enough to do the same. Dream 10X. Face your fears and make your life count. Hey, Dream 10X. This is your boy JC.
And Dr. Capel.
How's it going out there? It is frigid February 2021. It's cold outside.
There's a storm front coming in.
Yeah. Can't wait for the warm weather. It is, this is episode 24. And again, we are shooting to do at least 52 episodes. And we're trying to do one of these every week, every 2 weeks or so. So this week, we are talking about a book called Let My People Go Surfing. And speaking of frigid, I was in the kitchen thinking about, so I'm building a surfboard with Evelyn, my daughter.
That's so cool.
We just got a kit, and we're going to build it this winter and spring so she can go surfing this summer.
Perfect.
And so I'm standing in the kitchen thinking about building this board with her and going surfing and how much fun it would be to be outside in warm weather. And for some reason, the phrase "let my people go surfing" popped in my head, and so I'm like, "Hey, I've heard of that somewhere." And I said, "Cindy, have you ever heard of this book called Let My People Go Surfing? I wonder if we have that." She's like, "I gave that to you."
Yeah, I bought it for you like, I don't know, a year and a half ago. And you're like, yeah, that's nice. Put it on the shelf.
Yeah, so you went and fished it out for me, right?
I did, yeah.
So I ended up reading it, and Let My People Go Surfing is by Yvon Chouinard, who founded Chouinard Equipment Company. He used to be like kind of a surf bum, climbing bum. So in high school, he was a little bit of a nerd.
Where's he from?
He was from Burbank, California.
Okay.
Why? You know him?
No, I was just curious. I didn't know if it was in Hawaii or Burbank or
North
Carolina. I don't know.
So this West Coast 5, you know. He was kind of a nerd in high school, so didn't do sports and stuff really. So he started a falconry club.
That's interesting.
And I don't know, what do you do with falcons? I have no idea. I guess you fly them. You go
yeah, they go like
what?
Hunt. Yeah.
You hunt with falcons?
Yeah.
So he's got this falcon club, and they end up, one of the members of the club teaches them how to rappel off of cliffs and stuff to get to the birds' nests for various reasons. I don't know why they do that. So started rappelling. And got in. So from learning how to rappel to get to the bird's nest led him to more mountaineering and hiking and that kind of thing. And eventually he really got into like mountain climbing. And so he started, I've never heard of this term, but pitons, Pitons. He started making these metal pitons, and basically they're metal spikes with loops in the end that you can hammer into rocks.
Oh.
And then you just put your rope through there, and it helps serve as a support for you, so you basically can tie into the rock by hammering these pitons into cracks and stuff in the stone. And so he started making these by hand. He made his own blacksmith's forge and started making these.
That's cool.
For himself when he went hiking up in the mountains and stuff. And so I right away I thought of you and your blacksmithing, your burgeoning blacksmithing skills. That might be something you could make, is these pitons. However, once you'll later find out what happened to the pitons, you probably won't want to. But so people started wanting to use these pitons that he was making for their own hiking. So he started making them for other people and selling them for like $1.50. And you could buy them from other places at the time, mostly from Europe. It was mostly a European thing, people hiking in the Alps or whatever. And you could buy them cheaper, but his were supposedly so much better for whatever reason, better shapes and better. I don't know. They were just better. I'm not a hiker, a mountain climber, or whatever. He also started making carabiners.
Oh, nice.
So you could he came up with his own carabiner design that you could just hook into the pitons and do your ropes and whatever. Well, did you ever, you hike? You like to hike, right?
I've done rappelling. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna talk about rappelling. I was a camp counselor after college for a summer, and I got put on the rappelling course to teach kids rappelling. I had no idea how to rappel.
Well, and you're scared of heights.
And I'm terrified of heights. And here I am, a civil graduate. And I have no idea how to rappel.
God,
My palms are sweating just climbing up to the top of this tower. But I eventually learned how to do it, and then I kind of faked my way. It's funny how trying to teach somebody to do something kind of accelerates your own learning, because that's really how I learned, is trying to teach these kids how to do it when I really had no freaking idea what I was talking about. Don't, you're going to be fine. Just jump off of there. The rope's going to hold you. Oh my God, I hope he doesn't die. So yeah, but I eventually got to the point. I think I even did like Australian rappelling, where you go down head first.
Yeah, that's a good time. I like that.
Yeah, I eventually owned that tower, but it took me a while. But anyway, so Yvon Chouinard, he is now a billionaire. Let's just start with that. So that's one of the things that interests me about him. Yeah. And he did it. He became a billionaire by focusing on creating a sustainable, eco-conscious business, basically. His company became Chouinard, I don't know how to say his name, Chouinard Equipment, and they made climbing hardware and hiking things, backpacks and whatever. And so that's how he got his start in the early 70s in Burbank, California.
It was in the 70s. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So from there, his business just took off, and people started buying these pittons left and right. Pittons, so like mittens, but pittons, these metal spikes that you would hammer into the rock to help you climb. And then they became so popular, he was soon to find out that the pittons on well-climbed areas was tearing up the stone.
Oh.
And people were just leaving them stuck in, and then I can't even imagine how you would pull them out. If you have to hammer it in such a way that it holds you on the face of a rock, I would imagine that getting it out would be a real hassle. And so, yeah, I mean, over time, these things get left in the rock, or they get yanked out and tear up the rock of the face of the rock. And so they started becoming an environmental problem. Yeah. Which was a problem for a company that's trying to be environmentally friendly. So that was one of their early pivots, was to move away from these metal pittons that the company had gotten their start with, to aluminum types of different shapes. I'm not even sure how you use them, but one of them is like a hexagon shape, and I don't. It's just something that you no longer hammered into a rock; you kind of wedged in there, and so they're like these hexagon things. One of them was called the hexacle or something like that. And so that was one of their early innovations as a company, is to pivot away from this environment, this thing that was doing damage to the environment, to something that was much more environmentally friendly. And sure enough, that became the new standard for climbing as well. And so Chouinard Equipment Company had great success doing selling these types of equipment to what he calls dirt bags. And basically the dirt bags is a term of endearment for climbers, people who don't, people who kind of shun normal society and corporate America and just love to climb and surf and be outside. And so these were kind of the clientele that he was catering to back then. Eventually, they created another, they kind of diversified what they were selling and got into clothing, and started off with like really rough corduroy that you could like climb in, and then eventually jackets and sweaters and everything else. And so the clothing line that they started became Patagonia. And you've heard of Patagonia.
Oh, yeah, right? Yeah. I have Patagonia in the closet.
Patagonia is a really well-known brand.
Yeah, and their quality is really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's because they have a crazy focus on quality. That's one of their big tenets. And I'll talk about that a little bit when I discuss some of the philosophies in this book. There's a lot of philosophy in this book, like corporate philosophy, and personal philosophy and how it drives our the way we do business, that kind of thing. So, but before we get into that, there's a surfer woman by the name of Kristen McDivitt, and she was a friend of somebody. I forget her relation, but Yvon invited her to come work for the company early on, and I really like the story about her because she. I'm trying to find the story in the book, but she did not have much focus as a high schooler in a college. What do you call it? College person. So she just skied basically in college, and didn't have any direction for what she wanted to do. But when she got hired to work for Chouinard, here we go, Chris McDivitt. She eventually became the general manager and the CEO of the company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and just did great things with it. And she says here on page 43, there were, she says, so Yvon gave me the companies, saying in effect, here's Patagonia, here's Chouinard equipment, do with him what you will, I'm going climbing. So he didn't want to he didn't run the business anymore. Yeah. He wanted somebody to take over management because they'd been going gangbusters since 1972. And by 1977, there were 16 people there and a general manager. And then in 1979, his brother quit, or her brother quit the company. So her brother worked at the company. He quit, and then Yvon didn't want to run the company anymore. He just wanted to go climb and surf. So she came on board and took over.
That's awesome.
And this woman is really interesting too, because I just think it's funny how she just wanted to, this little section here talks about how her guidance counselor, said, I know you're planning on sending Christine to college. Don't bother. In college, she was a downhill ski racer and wasn't sure exactly what degree she graduated with until years later when she returned to speak to the students. And then she ends up becoming, the CEO of this hugely successful company. And not only that, she ends up marrying this guy named Doug Tompkins, who is the CEO of North Face.
Oh.
And together they manage. Well, he died. She's still alive, but they manage over 2 million acres in South America.
Wow.
That's part of the whole Patagonia Preserve, and they're preserving. They bought all that land down there, and they preserved. I think they turned it back over to Argentina, if I'm not mistaken.
I think they did. Yeah.
2 million acres.
That's incredible.
So here she goes from somebody whose guidance counselor says, "Don't bother sending her to college. She's nothing."
Yeah.
To, who's as successful as that? You can probably a handful of people in the world, maybe.
And so that's like
I love that story.
That's a big proponent of, because people tell you and then what to believe about yourself, and then you ingest that.
Especially guidance counselors are always freaking.
This goes through adulthood too, and so don't accept other people's stories about you.
Yeah.
Create your own story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, I don't think she cared what anybody said. She sounds like
true, but a lot of people do. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot my kids do.
Yeah.
As well, and so I love that about her. I liked reading that. So the company takes off. It's growing extremely fast. It's hugely successful. And they are just having tremendous year-over-year growth. And that becomes their, they have other hurdles, but this becomes like one of their biggest hurdles. And the irony is they experience a year where they only had 20% growth from the previous year.
20% is still a lot.
People freaked out. Suppliers, whatever. Hey, you guys aren't doing nearly what you used to be doing. Only 20% growth. Something's wrong. Things started falling apart.
Oh my gosh.
They ended up having to lay off 20% of the company in 1991. 20% of the company. I forget how many. 120 employees at the time.
Ouch.
Yeah. Because it started this whole chain of events and plus it was a tough year in 91.
Yeah.
So they really, that's when this whole we really need to get to we need to develop this philosophy for our company. It needs to be more sustainable. No company can sustain plus 20% growth every year.
No.
And so they really had a come to Jesus meeting, had everybody get together and think about what it is to work here, what does it mean to be a sustainable business, both in terms financially and all these other things, also environmentally, ecologically, or whatever. And so they cut things back to where they were only growing 5% a year for the most part. And that's on purpose because they don't want to grow too fast and then crash.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a thing. And some other things that I pulled out of this whole discussion about sustainable growth is he mentioned several times about the Iroquois tribe, where they have one person in the tribe who represents the 7th generation of the people, and any decision that the tribe makes has to get buy-in from this person who represents the 7th generation.
Interesting.
7th generation in the future.
Yeah.
So this person in the tribe is thinking, okay, the decisions that we're making now, how is this going to impact our people in seven generations?
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Isn't that powerful?
Yeah.
Like, how come governments don't think like that?
We're all rooted in today's crazy.
How come our society? Yeah. Man. How could we try to kill out this type of idea, this type of thinking? So I just really love that. And how can we bring that into our lives as a family? How can we think? Because we try to think, when we're gone, what are we leaving to our kids and how are they going to manage it and all that kind of thing. But 7 generations, how do you think that's like, how do we build generational wealth and security in a family, in a tribe, in a business, in a government, That's just, I love that.
Really
love
powerful.
that. So that was a great thing I pulled out of this book, the whole Iroquois idea. And so using that paradigm, they try to operate with a 100-year business plan.
That's amazing.
Talk about sustainable business.
Yeah.
Hey, we're not going to, if our decision making doesn't allow us to exist 100 years from now, we're not going to do it. That's awesome.
That's incredible.
And if it means we're only going to grow 5% a year, that's what we're going to do. And I don't care what the shareholders want, 20 or 30%.
Yeah.
Love it. And also pulled away a falconry term called yerrick, which is another thing I really freaking love. And it means when you keep, it relates to a term when you keep your falcon in a super alert, hungry state, but it's not weak and it's ready to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that awesome?
So it's like you right before dinner.
Be in the state of yerrick. Constant state of yerrick. I'm not weak, I'm hungry, and I'm ready to hunt. I love that. Okay, and so real quick, the rest of the book is a bunch of philosophies that they kind of they pulled into their organization as a result of almost failing at that one point in 1991. And I'm not going to go over all of them. So read the book if you want to get more details on it. But I do just want to pull out some of the key ones that I took away. One of the philosophies is focus on quality. That quality is job one. Like, there's no point in making a product and selling it if you're not going to make the best quality product. Like, don't compete, be the best. But part of that is agreeing with your company on the definition of quality. And I thought that was interesting because there was one person who said, well, we'll never make clothing like this one Italian company makes. They sell the sweater for $300. It's handmade. The buttons are beautiful and blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, how long does it last after you wash it? And they said, well, it's $300. No one's going to wash that sweater. So, okay. I can't wear clothing that I don't wash on occasion because it gets too stinky. So that goes into the calculus of what defines a quality product.
Yeah, that's huge. Like in organizations, making sure everybody's on the same page. Like I can tell you some of the organizations I've worked at, what's quality to me is wildly different than quality to other people because they're saying, okay, so what's the 30% solution? And for me, a 30% solution is not good enough. We need to give the 90% solution to 100%. because it's the experience that our people are receiving, like our customers are receiving. So
yeah, I think that's he makes that point where even though you have to define your organization's definition of quality.
Yeah.
It is an objective standard. It is not subjective, and it's objective because the organization defines the parameters that define quality.
And a lot of people miss that step, and so I love that he actually highlighted that, saying that this is how you do it, because most people just make their own assumptions and it's not defined.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah, define what the standards of quality are,
Yeah.
and they're well defined within Patagonia.
Yeah.
And it's the first. It's the very. It's the most important aspect of what they do. It has to be a quality product.
Love that.
So, yep. Is it simple? Is your product simple? And again, this is, it's a simple idea. Make your product simple. But a lot of organizations don't get that right. Like, if you go to a website sometime to buy things, like going back to the surfboard thing, I was trying to buy this surfboard kit.
Oh my gosh.
And it was so complex to figure out what were the right options. There's all these different, long boards and short boards and fish and all these different shapes. And like, I have no idea what kind of surfboard to get my daughter. Like, what do I need? A 6'5" one? Do I need a 9? I had no idea. What kind of fins do I need? Do I need fin control system 1, 2, 3? So complex. And dude, all I want to do is surf. I want a board. Way too complex.
Yeah.
Way over-engineered a very simple thing in my mind. At least this one website. I don't know if they're all like that, but so yeah, simplicity is very important. And in the software world, so many people I've run into over the years over-engineer things. Like, because I think they think it shows how smart they are if you can put together some very complex solution for something. Whereas I think just the opposite. If we can make it as simple as possible, and you think I'm stupid, that's fine, as long as it's simple.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. Timely. Is your product timely? I thought this was also really intriguing because of the fact that he's talking about delivering clothing and mountain climbing things in a timely manner, products in a timely manner. Like, okay, how quickly are these consumers really evolving, and how But to him, he says, in the 1980s, a new product had to come out every 3 years in order to keep the company afloat.
Interesting.
But now he's like, every 3 months you got to, and I'm like, 3 months?
That's a
for
lot.
Climbing and clothing?
Yeah.
Like that? But apparently that's the case. So I'm thinking in the software world, technology, absolutely. It used to be like a year and a half.
Yeah.
Because of Moore's Law or whatever. But now it is probably 3 months or less. Oh. And his point is there's simply no time for inventing new things now. You have to innovate, which is a slight nuance to that. You're not creating something brand new. You're nuancing, retooling, and changing things a little bit. Like they went from the steel pittons to the hexagonal thing. One of my favorite quotes for the book that I used in the last episode that we put out on, page 114, is the Bill McDonough quote from the book Cradle to Cradle. And I really like this. So his question, the philosophy that they try to, another philosophy they try to adhere to is, does what we're doing cause any unnecessary harm? Because they don't want to harm to the environment, harm to consumers, whatever. That they don't want to do that, obviously. And one of the quotes I took away from here that I really love is, "We have to take responsibility for what we make, from birth to death, and then beyond death, back to rebirth." What the architect, designer, and author Bill McDonough calls cradle to cradle. And there's just so much in that quote that made me think about so many different things. And one of them is our technology. So Patagonia wants to have the philosophy that anything we make and we sell has an end game that is sustainable to the environment. So if somebody throws away a coat or whatever, we can take that clothing back and recycle it and make new clothes out of. So it's a never-ending loop. Whereas like an iPhone, for example. You buy an iPhone and it's end of life, and they come out with iPhone 44 XLZ. What do you do with your old phone? Like, what do I do with it? How do I recycle it? I guess you can send it back. I guess there are recycling programs. I'm just not aware of them. Like, but
a lot of people just throw them away.
But my data is on there. I don't want to send it back to Apple. So what do we do with it?
Yeah.
And all that mercury and stuff that's in there, it's...
Well, and not just the iPhone, but like it's cheaper to buy a new refrigerator than it is to fix your old one. And so what happens to the old refrigerator? Ends up in the dumpster and those kind of things. So it's like we're not taking care of the environment. We're just throwing things away and buying new. And so that's not... It's
cradle to grave. Cradle to dump.
Cradle to dump, which is a whole different challenge.
Yeah. And so that really got me thinking, cradle to cradle. Wow. How do you have that mindset as a business creating a product that I'm not going to sell something to somebody unless I have a cradle to cradle solution for it? Wow, that's really amazing.
Yeah.
I thought. I mean, and it's making me think about how I consume now and what I do with the stuff that I have. Because so often, so much technology and whatever just ends up in the trash can if we move or something like that. I'm like, I don't know what to do with it. Or paint, or old paint, you know.
Yeah.
What do I do with this old paint?
Yeah.
So anyway, I really, really love that quote. I'm going to keep using it. And like I said, I used it in the last blog post about Avoca Farm and how you were working on the farm. And I still really just love that. Okay, cradle to grave, cradle to cradle. Involve the designer and the producer in what you make, which goes back to the idea of what?
Communication? Oh my God.
Yeah, it's really what it is, communication, and not creating stovepipes in the process, really is what it boils down to. The analogy in construction is the architect who designs a house, and then the worker who actually takes those plans and builds it. Often there is a disconnect between the design and the implementation, and it's like that in software as well. A lot of times the people designing the software hand it over to somebody to implement, and there's a disconnect on how you can actually implement this design, this architected design. And so he's basically pointing out in this philosophy where you involve the designer and the producer in the production of a product, that they both communicate and that they're well in touch with the end user, and that what they're designing and producing is meeting the end user's goals. So it seems obvious. It's not obvious. It's not obvious anywhere. It's not common sense anywhere. So I like that. Page 121 talks about quality. Quality first against on-time delivery and low cost. I also really, really like this. So what do you do if those three are at odds? Although it's management's job to treat these three goals as complementary rather than contradictory, what does a company do when it must face a choice between quality, on-time delivery, and cost? What do you do? What would you do, manager?
So quality, on-time delivery, and cost. I'd go back to the values of the organization, and what does the organization value most? If quality is the number one thing, then that's the top priority.
There you go. And that's their number one thing. Yep. And he says Patagonia puts quality first, period. I love that. That's, if I were running a company, it'd be quality. It's the most important thing. Another thing I thought was really interesting was how they chose to measure quality. And they ended up measuring quality against the standards of Japanese people.
Oh,
because they have such higher standards for stuff, and it's almost like they were almost like, if we can deliver a quality product to Japanese people, then most everybody else will be satisfied.
Yeah, Americans don't value quality, I think.
And there was this great story in here about in Japan they had an office, and I forget what the problem was. Or some person in Japan didn't get something that they wanted right away. It wasn't right. Somebody dropped the order or something, and it took them a while to find the order and actually ship the thing. And so the customer in Japan said, hey, this is very horrible. I will never recommend you guys to anybody, and you guys are a horrible company, and I will always forever hate you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so the manager who received that, I forget what the first step was. It was like, called him up and said, I'm really sorry. We'll refund your money or whatever. And then the customer was like, I still don't like you. You guys suck, blah, blah, blah. So in response to that, the manager, this is all in Japan, the manager got on a train and went to the person's house. And according to some samurai tradition, put his head in a prostrate position on the customer's floor, apologizing for what he did.
Wow.
And did not respond in a timely manner. And then only then did the customer say, I accept your apology. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. So I really like that story. And then, so one thing I picked away from here, another thing I pulled out was on page 195. There's a statement that says, according to National Geographic, it takes 8 barrels of oil to produce 1 cow.
Wait, 8 barrels of oil to produce 1 cow?
8 barrels of oil. I don't know how, it didn't say how they did the calculation. I guess.
Cow, C-O-W?
C-O-W, yeah.
I don't understand the analogy.
The petroleum that it takes to, drive feed out to feed the cows and process the cows, drive them to the processing plant, then picking up the processing meat, all that, that's petroleum. It takes petroleum.
Yeah, talking about Karen and Avoca with having to drive.
Yes, that's what
now I rationalize. Okay.
I don't know if it's right.
Yeah.
It's just something I pulled out. That seems exorbitant amount of. So anyway, it was just talking about how important it is to think about the logistics of your business and how you're impacting the environment, from taking flights to go to conferences to you name it. So finally, one last point is there's one quote that I like, and it says, there's no business to be done on a dead planet. And that's why all of this is so uber important. Cradle to cradle.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Talk to you next week.
Bye.
Cheers.